You know, there are various aspects of the current criminal code and the way it's applied which have the most negative effects on people working in prostitution. And you kind of go through, some of them are statutory, some of them are long-term effects, and some of them are enforcement effects. The statutory problem is primarily the mandatory jail terms. The fact that for the most part, people aren't complaining about most of the people who are working in the sex industry. Only about 10% of the people work in the sex industry, or 10% of the people who are selling sex, which we define as prostitution, work on the streets. And most all of the complaints are coming from neighborhoods about street walking. They're not coming so much about escort services or people working in a massage parlor, things of that nature. Much fewer complaints. But all of these people are subject to mandatory 30-day jail sentences. The statutory problem is enhanced by the long-term effects of having a criminal record. Once you have that conviction on your record as a prostitute, it follows you for a long, long time. I have a friend who is been the head of a nonprofit that helps transgendered girls get on through, who many of them are former prostitutes, some of them are getting over addiction, some are coming out of prison. And she had a conviction for prostitution 25 years ago, which is still on her record, which has prevented her from qualifying for various educational assistance, which would allow her to get degrees and things to help her in her work, merely because she has this 25-year-old misdemeanor conviction for soliciting. That's really bad. If the community is so concerned about the level of prostitution, you'd think that they would support efforts to make it easy for people who are prostitutes to move out of that industry. Instead, it's been made difficult. That's got to change. The third thing is the abuse within the system, which it's varied from time to time and place to place, and it's not consistent in any one time or place. Years ago, transgendered people working in the sex industry in Chinatown were frequently physically assaulted by law enforcement. This is not the common situation now, but it was. If you talk to people who worked in Chinatown in the 60s and the 70s, most of them have stories of being just beaten up by police officers. Not arrested, just beaten up. The arrests really started in the 1980s. There's stories where transgendered prostitutes are in the police cell blocks and they're required to do a strip search in the cell block, but they turn on a radio and they expect you to dance in front of a lot of male officers while this takes place, and this has been repeated numerous times. There are girls who are put in the cell blocks with a group of men being held in a holding block and been raped. There are numerous cases of well, I won't say numerous, but there are occasional cases of sex workers, both transgendered and female, who've been raped by police officers. There's only been, to my knowledge, one conviction in all of the history in Hawaii of a police officer for sexually assaulting a prostitute, which was about 3 years ago. A lot of times police officers are paying dates. Prostitutes don't complain about that. The police are not in favor of that, but that happens. And there's there's other cases of various types of miscellaneous abuse. Pam Bessels, who is another ally in this, talks about cases where a bunch of people would be jaywalking in Waikiki, and the police would single out the one woman who was a known prostitute and give her a ticket and ignore everyone else just to harass, the prostitute. I have a friend who was a transgendered woman who was prostituting, and she and a man who she was having a sexual act with in a car in a parking lot, the police came to the car and made them get out of the car, and started, questioning the man, trying to get him to, to say what had happened, because they had no other evidence. And she was yelling at the man he didn't have to say anything, which is basically what his rights are. You don't have to say anything, be quiet. She was handcuffed and physically assaulted, shoved so she fell on the ground. She was bleeding from her fall. She was kept in the police cell block overnight without medical attention. her mother, of all people, came down and complained very vehemently about the way she'd been treated. I don't know how that was ever resolved, if it was litigation or not. But the treatment of prostitutes at the hands of law enforcement is not bad. I don't want to knock law enforcement specific, because a lot of police officers are very helpful when people are in trouble, even prostitutes, and have been very good to the women and treated them fairly. So I'm not saying that this is goes on all the time, but you've got a criminal law that frankly makes no sense. It shouldn't be on the books at all. If it's not on the books, this problem of police abuse, of the criminal record that follows people around, of putting people in jail for 30 days for a 10-second conversation, all of those problems go away. And what the other problems are, then we can deal with in a socially responsible, respective, and voluntary way. Most of the problems have solutions. Not perfect solutions, but solutions. So it's a question of, do we want to try to solve problems, or do we want to just attack people and allow politics, which seems to revolve around identifying enemies and seeing how hard you can kick them, continue to create problems for everyone in the community?